Before we dive into the interview, I'd like you to support the channel by liking this video, dropping a comment, and subscribing. It really helps with the algorithm and getting the content out to more people. And if you can, share it far and wide so that we can reach the largest audience possible. Thank you for your support. And now let's get started. Scott Ritter is a former United States Marine Corps intelligence officer, first Gulf War veteran where he played a critical role in the hunt for the Iraqi SCUD missiles. Mr. Ritter later served as inspector for the United Nations in Iraq, tasked with overseeing the disarmament of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction after the Gulf War. Mr. Ritter was a vocal critic of the American decision to go to war with Iraq. His new book, Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, Arms Control and the End of the Soviet Union, is his ninth. In the video description below, you find links to Scott Ritter's website, where you can access his social media, follow his news, podcasts, interviews, articles, and purchase his books and merchandise to support his work. So, Scott Ritter, welcome to Unfiltered with Sam. What an honor to host you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Considering, I'd like to start off with Gaza, and I'd like to go just a bit back to last year because it's something that's always in the back of everyone's minds. I'd like to ask you that, considering that the head of the Egyptian Secret Service Agency revealed back then, in the days following the October 7th attacks, that his agency had intelligence about the attack and had relayed it to the Israelis 2 weeks prior, and that former Israeli soldiers who had manned outposts along the wall had also stated that the surveillance systems there are so advanced they could detect even a bird or a cockroach approaching from hundreds of meters away. Do you believe that the world's most monitored wall and one of the most sophisticated intelligence networks were truly compromised for a full 8 hours on that October 7th, 2023?
I don't necessarily believe that the intelligence collection capabilities of the Israelis were compromised. In fact, the evidence shows that the Israelis were collecting intelligence about Hamas's activities right to the lead up of the attack, and that the observers were reporting this through their chain of command. The problem isn't about the collection of intelligence. It's what's done with the intelligence, how the intelligence is processed and then assessed by the decision makers. So there's a historic example from history, 1973, in the lead up to the Yom Kippur War. Israeli intelligence was collecting a tremendous amount of information that showed Egypt was getting ready to launch an attack across the Suez Canal. And indeed, the Jordanian intelligence services, the Jordanian king, contacted Golda Meir and said, the Egyptians are going to attack you. So you can't say that there was a failure on the part of Israeli intelligence, per se, in terms of the collection. The problem was that Golda Meir and her immediate advisors didn't believe that Egypt would attack. They had what they called the conception of Egypt's strategic intent. And they said it makes no sense because the military professionals said that Egypt would not be able to sustain this attack and that it would eventually set itself up for a defeat. Therefore, Egypt would never initiate something that it couldn't win. And so they disregarded the intelligence. They said it's just the Egyptians putting on a show or something of that nature. A similar conception existed within the government of Benjamin Netanyahu leading up to October 7th. You see, Hamas was, of course, in large part created with the assistance, or at least the design of Israel, funded by Israel, designed to offset Fatah, to create a division within the ranks of the Palestinian community. And then what the Israelis thought they had accomplished was when Hamas transitioned from a purely what the Israelis would call a terrorist organization, what supporters of Palestine would call a resistance organization. But when they transitioned into politics, that is the necessity of governing a complicated territory like Gaza with a lot of people crammed into a very little place, that Hamas could be distracted away from violence towards the mundane reality of trying to keep people employed, how to govern. And so the Israelis bought off or thought they bought off Hamas by creating thousands of work visas that would allow citizens of Gaza to go to Israel, engage in work, bring salaries back to Gaza, and help the Gazan economy. And in doing so, help Hamas promote itself as a legitimate governing authority. And the conception of the Israeli government was that Hamas would be satisfied with this, that the people of Palestine would be satisfied with this. And so when the reports came in that said Hamas is preparing for an attack, the conception was, of course, they're not, because we've bought them off. They have something taking place right now. Why would they throw that at risk? Why would they do anything to bring an end to this? And so they couldn't conceive of Hamas actually carrying through with the attack. They thought that this was just, exercises, training, posturing by Hamas. And so that's the interpretation that I'm embracing at the moment. We still don't know everything. It would be nice to get an Israeli investigation after the Yom Kippur War. Israel did carry out a very detailed investigation, and it's from this investigation that we now know about the failures of the Israeli leadership and the intelligence community. I believe that at some point in time, Israel will have to carry out a similar investigation and call to account those people who were in charge to find out why they didn't do more to prevent the Hamas attack. But I personally don't believe that. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that Benjamin Netanyahu let this happen, that the Israeli government allowed this to happen. I'm very critical of the Israeli government. Anybody who listens to what I say and reads what I write would know that. But I've been to Israel. I spent many years in Israel working with the Israeli government at the highest levels. And I will say this, to me, the notion that the Israeli government would allow an attack to take place that would kill hundreds, if not thousands, of Israelis is beyond belief. The Israelis may have no regard for Palestinian life, and the Israelis may have the Hannibal doctrine that says you will kill prisoners before they're taken back and turned into political pawns. But the Israeli government, from my experience, does not turn its back on the Israeli citizen. Its job is to protect the Israeli citizen. And it would be beyond belief that the Israeli government would allow something to happen that would deliberately put at risk hundreds, if not thousands, of Israeli lives.
So despite the rhetoric that Hamas never stopped saying, you believe that it was all like lip service, and the Israelis were just thinking that, okay, Hamas is playing her role, appeasing her people in her rhetoric, and they're actually getting comfortable with governing in reality.
I believe that there were elements in the senior echelons of Israeli leadership that bought into this, that believe this. Remember, Israel's focus at the time wasn't Gaza, and it wasn't even the West Bank. Israel's focus in the lead up to October 7th was the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor, was normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia, was perfecting relations with the United Arab Emirates, and et cetera. That was their focus. They were singularly focused on that. And Gaza was a sideshow. So it's, again, today, when we imagine the Israeli government, we imagine a cabinet meeting where they're looking at Gaza very closely and they're very focused on it. On October 6th, they were not looking at Gaza very closely. It was pushed to the side. They were looking at how do we finalize the normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia. All eyes were on a pair of islands off the coast of Israel and Saudi Arabia that Egypt had transferred control to Saudi Arabia. Israel was now negotiating with Saudi Arabia on the presence of military forces and what kind of agreement could be made, and could they use that agreement as a stepping stone for the formal, formalizing the normalization of relations. That's where everybody's mind was. And so the Israeli government would be explaining away Gaza, saying, no, we have that under control. We've bought them off. Hamas is going to be happy with the arrangement we have. They'll never violate that. We're focused on Saudi Arabia. Today, we look back on that and we say, how foolish can you be? But that's wisdom that comes with
hindsight.
Experience. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very hard to wrap my mind around it, because they are just so sophisticated in everything from their intelligence networks and the army. What's hard to wrap my mind around it is that they were compromised for a full 8 hours. And you're talking about the Hamas warriors whose weapons are not as sophisticated, or the surveillance systems. So those 8 hours at that big gap, that's hard to believe that.
Well, but you also, Israelis are not supermen. I think we've seen that.
Yeah.
They're as human as we are.
Yeah.
And when today we examine the situation armed with the knowledge of what has happened.
Okay.
But on October 7th, the arrogance of the Israelis was unimaginable.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that they are disorganized, because it completely conveyed the view that, oh my God, they were completely caught in the dark and they were disorganized. It's hard to believe that of Israel and Israelis.
But when you look at their intelligence, for instance, one of the things that the Israelis had done is to automate their intelligence. I know it, and so you subordinate your analysis to the computer.
Okay.
And so, and what happens is, if that becomes your method of operating, when something happens that shatters that, and you now have to adjust to the reality of having to start from scratch, to start all over using skill sets you haven't used because you've allowed the computer to do them for you, there will be a period of time of adjustment and shock.
Well,
and I think that's what explains this period of time. Israel was in a state of shock, and they were being called upon to do things that they hadn't prepared for, they hadn't conceived of. They never imagined this happening. And so now they're called upon to react. And it was absolute chaos, absolute disorganization that we're not normally accustomed to thinking of when we think of the Israelis. When we think of the Israelis, we think of the consummate professionals, very technically oriented, great leadership.
Analyzing everything, one step ahead of everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the Israelis are humans. And when humans are hit with a shock, they react as humans do. They panic, they make bad decisions.
Yeah.
And this is what the Israelis did. I think what makes it shock is that we're not accustomed to the Israelis behaving this way. And now we've seen it. But if you go look at any nation, look at Stalin after the Germans invaded in June of 1941. He went silent. Why? The shock.
The shock.
They had to adjust. Now, later on in 1945, you could never imagine Stalin, the victor, being shocked like that, and et cetera. But it happened. The United States, Pearl Harbor, when the Japanese came over Pearl Harbor, look at how the United States responded, the chaos, the uncertainty, et cetera. It happens to everybody when you're hit with a shock of that magnitude. Look at how the United States responded to 9/11 in the hours afterwards, the chaos, the confusion, as we tried to figure out what was going on. So I think we just have to stop viewing the Israelis as supermen and realize that at the end of the day, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody.
Okay. I'm still going to ask you about Gaza. Do you think the real reason for the Gaza war now is to supply Europe with oil and gas, being the coast of Gaza is sitting on some of the largest reserves in the Eastern Mediterranean. Is this the opportunity maybe also now that they can do that?
Well, again, let's go back before October 7th. I mean, the Israelis were moving in that direction. It's not just what they were doing with Gaza, but what they were doing with Lebanon. Playing with the line, the map of the line, how you project the line off of the coast, played a big role in who would get what. Now Hezbollah set the Israelis straight and said, if you try to take our stuff, we'll blow up your rigs. And so the Israelis made the appropriate adjustment. But the Palestinians didn't have that kind of negotiating position. And Israel was intimidating Palestinian fishermen, and so Israel was moving in a direction where they were going to de facto take control of the Palestinian of gas reserves that Palestine should have.
Yeah.
But this war wasn't started because Israel was trying to take Palestinian gas. This war was started because Hamas was going to create a Palestinian homeland. That's what October 7th was all about. The October 7th attack was designed to get Israel to overreact, to get Israel to commit to a fight in Gaza that could not be ignored, a fight of such magnitude that it would become existential in nature. And Hamas believed Israel would expose the reality of Israel to the world. On October 6th, people were speaking about the Israelis as if they could be part of the international community, normalization of relations, big economic treaties, Israel being at the center of, the civilized world. Today, Israel is a much maligned state, apartheid state, genocide state. The International Court of Justice is prosecuting it for genocide. The International Criminal Court is prosecuting the leaders for war crimes. Israel is a much diminished state in terms of world opinion. This is all because of October 7th, all because of Hamas's master plan. So I don't think this war was about Israel trying to take over resources. If anything, it was about Hamas trying to hold in check Israel. Because if there's going to be a Palestinian state, guess who's going to own the oil fields and gas fields off of the coast of Gaza?
Yeah, it's only right and fair, right?
It's what law requires.
It's what the law requires. On October 1st, 2024, it became clear to a lot of us, or most of us, that Israel's missile defense system is ineffective. Further supported by this past Sunday's 13th of October, Hezbollah's drone attack on the base of the Golani Brigade, as sirens mysteriously did not activate and the air defense system failed to detect, warn, and intercept the drones. Can October 1st be viewed as a success for Iran? And are we witnessing the collapse of the myth surrounding Israel's invincible Iron Dome?
Well, we've been seeing the collapse of that myth for some time now. Look, the Iron Dome was designed to defend Israel against the kind of low technology saturation attacks that were coming out of Gaza, and similar low technology saturation attacks coming out of Hezbollah. For instance, what happened in 2006.
Yeah.
So Iron Dome is a high-tech solution to a low-tech problem. It's an amazing feat of technology. We should acknowledge that, but it's defending against a problem set that's very limited in capabilities. The moment you increase the speed, maneuverability, et cetera, of the incoming projectiles, Iron Dome is no longer effective. So we shouldn't talk about Iron Dome. What we should be talking about is the Patriot, the Arrow 2, the Arrow 3, David Sling, and now THAAD, Aegis offshore, modern anti-ballistic missile defenses. Rockets coming out of Gaza and out of Hezbollah are not ballistic missiles. They're artillery rockets. They don't fire a true ballistic trajectory. It's more akin to artillery fire with a lower angle, etc. But the the feeling was that because Israel had mastered Iron Dome, that we just assumed they had mastered the rest of the missile defense umbrella, integrating the Patriot with Arrow 2, Arrow 3, with David Sling, et cetera. But the problem is, all of these technologies are actually quite old. If you take a look at, if you break them down, Patriot, actually dates back to technologies belonging to the Safeguard missile defense system of the 1960s and 70s. Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 is a derivative of Patriot. So, again, it's that David Sling is sort of related to THAAD. But all of these are technologies that are more than a decade old, in some cases 2 decades old, or even more. They have never been tested in a real world combat environment. I mean, even the Patriot during the Gulf War in 1991, it failed to shoot down any Iraqi SCUDs.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have a great track record. When these systems are tested, they're tested in an environment. Remember, this is a lot of money that's going into the manufacture of these systems, and so you want to have successful tests. So oftentimes they cheat. Oftentimes they make the target bigger. They make it reflect more. They give cues so that the radar can pick up on it, track it to make the intercept. And then once they do that, then they repeat it and drop the cheating away. But it's really repeating the same thing. And so you can repeat the experiment enough times to say this is a success. But they've never tested it against hypersonic missiles with separating maneuvering warheads.
Exactly. They're getting tested
and even
now.
If they did,
yeah,
they'd only test against one at a time.
Yeah.
What happens when you fire 30 at a time and you
180.
180 at a time,
Yeah.
maybe 1,000 at a time?
Yeah.
The system doesn't work. It overloads. It crashes. The firing solutions get jumbled, and the system's no good. This was a system designed to fail, to be honest. It can't succeed. It was never going to succeed, and everybody knew it wouldn't succeed. And so we're at a situation now where Iran has developed a solution to this non-functioning ballistic missile shield, and everybody knows this. I know you hear a lot of talk about the United States and Israel saying what a failure the October 1st attack was. It's not a failure. It was a success. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, and it sent a signal to Israel that the next time, if Iran was to come in with more missiles aimed at different targets, that they would destroy the targets that they're aiming at. When you put 32 impacts on Nevatim Air Base, the most heavily defended place in the world, and 32 warheads impacted Nevatim, that means that if those 32 had been aimed at a power generation plant or a water purification plant, that those facilities would be destroyed. That is critical infrastructure for the survival of Israel. And if Iran were to strike the critical infrastructure, Israel would be shut down as a modern nation state.
Well, I mean, they did send a very strong message, and the Israelis and the Americans don't want that to come out, but people are waking up to this, I believe, because of people like you appearing on podcasts. But on mainstream media, this doesn't even go out.
No.
Go on. It's important to know that since you mentioned Iran, it's important to know that Iran has not withdrawn from the NPT, considering that there has not been an officially declared capability on the part of Iran or any other official agency or body. Do you believe that Iran is a nuclear power now?
Iran is 100% a nuclear power. It may not possess a functioning weapon right now, but it possesses all of the capabilities to produce a functioning weapon, and I believe that they possess the vast majority of the components for a functioning weapon. But the most important thing is the political decision. Iran is a theocracy, and I don't know where people stand on supporting it or being it. It's their business, not mine. Uh, but you have to respect the fact that it is a theocracy and that the Iranians take their religion very seriously, especially at the highest levels. So when the supreme leader um, issues a fatwa, a religious edict, saying that nuclear weapons are haram, forbidden, um, this has to be taken seriously, and it was taken seriously. One of the reasons why Barack Obama entered into the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2015 was he respected the fatwa that had been issued by Ali Khamenei. So, um, having said that, now let's take a look at some things that have happened over time. Because again, when you study, um, especially the Shia Islam and how it's practiced in Iran, it's actually far more democratic than people I think realize. And what I mean by that is, first of all, to become an Ayatollah, to become a man, a senior religious man, that this requires oftentimes 30 or more years of stringent religious and academic training, study. You just don't become an Ayatollah off the streets. It's not like becoming a Catholic priest or an American Presbyterian minister. You don't get a 4-year seminary degree and suddenly, boom, you are empowered by the will of God to speak. To become an Ayatollah in the Shia faith, as it's practiced in Iran, you have to study, go to a marja, be educated. You have to pass certain tests to make sure that you are pious, to make sure that you understand religion in its proper context, not just the rote memorization of the scripture. And then your final test is you have to write sort of, I guess, the equivalent of a PhD thesis. It's basically your interpretation of an event of modern relevance as it is impacted by religion, how religion impacts this, and then you sell it to the people because this is your interpretation. And then once you put that out there, you have the opportunity to create your own marja, your own following. And it's based upon the people's willingness to accept you as somebody who can serve as an interpreter of faith, as you can educate them on faith. If you put stuff out there, let's say you wrote a paper on music in Islam, and people read it and went, I like music. This guy hates music. He's saying you can't play music. I don't support this. I'm not attending his marja. Well, he has just failed. Without support, you can't sustain yourself, and you're not going to be a religious figure of note. So there's a lot of democracy involved in this. And the important thing here, though, is how religion can be interpreted based upon the present circumstance. That's the important aspect, the takeaway here.
Okay.
How religion can be interpreted based upon the present circumstance. A fatwa is not permanent.
Exactly.
A fatwa can be modified if the present circumstance has changed so much and it has religious implications.
Religious existential implications?
Implications, that's right. And so what's happened, we started in April. A senior officer in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps came out and said that the fatwa, he's the first guy that came out and said the fatwa is not permanent. It can be changed. And if Israel attacks our nuclear facilities, that is an existential change in the present circumstances that could cause the fatwa to be lifted. Now, he doesn't get to come out and say these things on his own. In order for him to say this, he has been told, you need to say this. This is the beginning of what is known as declaratory policy. And so the supreme leader has now made a decision that the fatwa can be changed if circumstances allow it. And they made that announcement. It's not the supreme leader making that announcement, but it's somebody who is in a position of power. In May, the former foreign minister of Iran, who is now he served under Khatami, and he's on the Expediency Discernment Council, which is a constitutionally mandated body that advises the supreme leader, made a similar statement. Again, somebody within the Expediency Discernment Council, who advises the supreme leader, makes a similar announcement. So this isn't just military now. We're getting into the civil side of this. This was followed up by, I believe, last month or earlier this month, a committee within the parliament, the Iranian parliament, is now advising the supreme leader to get out of the nuclear nonproliferation treaty and to change the fatwa. Now, this is advice that only happens, again, if there has been, things just don't happen in a vacuum. And you don't get to publish this stuff in the newspaper on a whim. This happened because there is an ongoing discussion within Iran about what to do if Israel is to attack Iran's nuclear infrastructure or if Israel is to use nuclear weapons. So if they're talking about the political decision, that means that they have made a decision to prepare for that moment. Now, these can be reversible decisions. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if Iran was to create a nuclear weapon, it would take the path of least resistance because it would be done in an emergency situation where it has to be done rapidly if it's going to have any impact at all. You don't want, for instance, an implosion device, a plutonium-based implosion device. Why? Well, it's a more complicated weapon system. The explosive lenses need to be tested. The critons that are used to set it off need to be tested. More importantly, how do you get the plutonium? You need to reprocess the spent fuel rods, and you can't do that with international inspectors there. So let's forget about implosion device. Let's talk about a gun device. A gun device is what we used in the United States against Hiroshima. You know, we tested a nuclear bomb in Alamogordo, New Mexico in July of 1945. We tested an implosion device. Why? Because it's complicated. You know what we didn't test? The gun device. Why? Because it works all the time.
Doesn't it?
And that's the first bomb we dropped, was the gun device. So now, if I'm the Iranians and I'm going to have a rapid breakout scenario, it's going to be a gun design. It has to be a gun design. It's a simple design. It only requires between 70 and 120 pounds of highly enriched uranium. The Fatah 1 solid rocket hypersonic system can carry a warhead of 900 pounds, 450 kilograms. So it can easily carry this device. And so I believe the Iranians have already designed a warhead that can carry a gun device. I believe they have built the gun device, that the gun device exists, it's mounted on the warhead, it's ready to fire. All they need is the fissile material. In this, they have 60% enriched uranium hexafluoride already built up. They have significant quantities of it. They have just in July installed a new 1,400 strong centrifuge cascade of the most modern centrifuge. I believe it's the IR-8 centrifuge, highly efficient centrifuge cascade in the Firdos underground facility. If Iran decides to take 60% uranium and run it through this IR-8 cascade, within a matter of days, they will have sufficient highly enriched uranium for up to 3 bombs, and within a week, up to 5 bombs. They already have the ability to turn uranium hexafluoride into metal. And again, once you have the metal, now it's just a matter of taking the appropriate size. You take one and you make it the target. The other one is the slug. You put it in the gun device, and when the gun fires, boom, boom, it's done. Iran can have nuclear weapons ready to deliver against Israel within 3 days. That's my assessment. The political decision has already been made. Already made. There won't be any debate. All it takes is if Israel does something, the supreme leader says, I change it, go. And they've already have everything in place. And this is why I believe the Iranians have been making these statements public, so that intelligent people in Washington, D.C. and Israel are listening to this and saying, guys, we don't want to do this. We don't want to go down this route because the consequences will be this. But the reason why Iran can't say it is because the United States is on record saying that if Iran develops a nuclear weapon, we will attack Iran.
Yeah.
So Iran's not going to come out and say this. at their appropriate time, when it becomes apparent that the U.S. is either going to attack directly or facilitate an Israeli attack, Iran will withdraw from the NPT, as the law requires. They will evict the international inspectors, and they will immediately enrich this uranium. And that can all be done in a matter of days. But until then, Iran will comply with the NPT, will allow the inspectors to do their work. And I think that's where we are right now. But as far as I'm concerned, Iran is a nuclear weapons power.
Thank you for that thorough analysis. Really scary, but thank you. On that note, what steps should be taken, and they actually should be taken? We shouldn't be talking about the scenario you just put out. And by whom, to revive the JCPoA, the Iran nuclear deal, and for it to be viable? And should Israel also be a part of this process when officially they are not considered a nuclear nation?
I think we're at the point right now, because of this crisis and the threats that are being made directly or implied by Israel, that you cannot talk about a revival of the JCPoA unless Israel is a party to this. That if Iran is going to be subjected to restrictions, inspections, etc., Israel must sign the NPT and become party to the exact same verification methodologies that are put in there. Israel will have to do what South Africa did, declare its nuclear weapons program and turn its weapons over to international inspectors for accountability and for to be disposed of. But the day of Israel, we're no longer talking theoretics. Up until now, it's always been the theory of this, the theory of that. Now we're talking about scenarios that, look, Israel cannot attack Iran's nuclear infrastructure with conventional weapons.
Yeah.
The Firdos underground facility is impervious to conventional weapons.
Yeah.
So to take out, when people talk about striking nuclear facilities, they're talking about
what Trump said the other day.
Correct. And that's why I said that Trump was threatening a nuclear attack against Israel, and people objected. And I said, then you don't know anything about Donald Trump, and you don't know anything about American nuclear policy. Donald Trump is the man who rewrote the American nuclear employment plan so that we had nuclear weapons specifically designed to strike Iran put into the mix. So because he knew that we can't strike Iran's nuclear facilities with conventional weapons. If we're to destroy them, we have to use nuclear weapons. We built the nuclear weapons and we deployed the nuclear weapons, and they're part of our nuclear warfighting plan. Donald Trump knew this. So when he said to strike, he was saying to strike with nuclear weapons. That's the reality. And so when Israel speaks of striking Iran's nuclear capabilities, they're talking about using nuclear weapons preemptively. And once that's in the mix, once we're articulating that, Israel can't be trusted to have this this policy of strategic ambiguity anymore. We know they have these weapons, and it's time for, if there's going to be genuine peace in the region, and if you ever want peace between Israel and Iran again, Israel has to put its nuclear weapons on the table. The day of strategic ambiguity is done. Israel is a de facto declared nuclear power, and we must get rid of their nuclear weapons. And if you want to bring Iran back into the fold, to get them to back away from this de facto nuclear power that they currently are, then they can only do that if Israel is likewise being restrained. Iran will never agree, I believe, in the future to have its nuclear program subjected to constraints that Israel doesn't have, because now Israel and Iran are literally staring at each other in an existential manner.
Yes, yes. So what you just mentioned about Israel is them basically applying the Samson option, which a lot of people don't know about, but that is what it actually dictates. It dictates Israel's existential response to an existential threat. And also you mentioning
But this is more dangerous than the Samson option.
It is.
The Samson option is about Israel being confronted with an existential threat, saying, if we're going down, we will take everybody down with us. We're talking about something different. We're talking about Israel preemptively attacking Iran.
That's crazy.
Completely different scenario. Yeah.
Okay. The nuclear employment doctrine that Trump enforced, many people, even in America, don't know about this. not to mention in the world. So it's pretty scary that this thing has been in place for all these years, and it's only now coming out in the open, through people like you and your analysis. I'd like to go to Lebanon now, Mr. Ritter. I'd like to
Can
ask.
we wait until the war's over? I hear it's a beautiful place, but I don't want to go to Lebanon when
you
when there's a war.
with all your years in the Middle East, in Iraq, and also in Israel, you have spent all these years, which is right next door. You never visited?
Well, first of
Beautiful.
all, being a military intelligence person, there was a period of time where they would kill me if I landed in Lebanon. I remember one time a flight that I was taking from Amsterdam to Israel, a Sabina flight, had an issue and it landed in Beirut.
Oh,
and I
with
was
you
on
on
board.
board.
Yes, and I'm like, oh no, oh man, this is bad. This is really, really bad.
When was this? What year, more or less?
It was in the 1990s, 1990, like 1995, around there.
Okay, the Civil War was over, so
The Civil War was over, but still,
yeah.
and so I just didn't want to risk it. But fortunately, nobody came on the airplane, and none of us left the airplane. They resolved whatever the issue was, and we got back on our way. But I remember landing and looking out the window and seeing the jeeps with militiamen, what I assume were militiamen, driving alongside us and surrounding the plane. And I was just going through the word. I'm sitting there looking at my passport, going, "What do I do with this?
What do I do? Are they here for me?" Well, let's hope the war is over soon, and we'd love to host you there. I mean, Lebanese are very loving people, and
Oh no, I'd go. I was supposed to go in 2006. I had been invited to a conference that was run by the Lebanese presidency, and it was held in a compound in the Shuf Mountains overlooking Beirut. And
that's from where I'm from.
the day before I was supposed to depart, Israel bombed the Beirut International Airport.
Oh, so that's when the war
the
started.
2006 war,
The 33-day war.
Yep.
But it's a beautiful, beautiful country. It's one of the most beautiful in the world.
It's on my bucket list of places I have to go.
Happy to host you, sir.
Thanks.
So let's go to Lebanon. What if I wanted to ask you about the pager and walkie-talkie incidents, and what if these incidents happened with just one of those people on a commercial airliner? And additionally, I'd like to ask, what if the attacks were reversed? I mean, with Russia targeting Ukrainian officials or Iran targeting Israeli officials, would the West remain silent as it has with Israel? There's very strong double standards in place here.
Oh, it's a huge double standard. First of all, it's an act of terrorism. There's not a single rational player in the world that doesn't view it for what it is. It's a massive war crime. It's an act of terrorism. There's no there's a term I'm looking for. There's no ability to discern between friend and foe. It's very indiscriminate in nature. And this is what makes it a war crime, and it is a literal war crime. The United States would never do this because we couldn't get it through the legal checks. I mean, as much as people hate America, and I know there's a lot of disdain towards America, and America has committed war crimes, and we have done horrible things. I'm fully aware of that. But, we do have lawyers that are attached at every phase of the decision-making process. And, as most lawyers do, they can try to explain away just about everything. I mean, we've had lawyers explain away torture in Guantanamo Bay and all this. You can't explain away this. There's not a lawyer in the American system that would articulate a defense of the pager attack under international law before the President of the United States or the Director of the CIA. They'd be thrown out of the office because it's such a flagrant violation of international law. If Russia had done this, we'd still be condemning them today. We wouldn't miss a chance to condemn them. If anybody had done this, that's our opponent. We'd be pressing every day. It'd be headline news. America demands, the International Criminal Court prosecute this, that, and the other thing. The United States wanted to look what we did with Bosnian war criminals, and how we hunted them down, after the fact. We would do the same thing to anybody who does. Israel, it's see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. We just pretend we don't even talk about it right now. In the United States, we don't talk. This. Let me put on my other hat. I mean, what Israel did from an intelligence standpoint, from an operational standpoint, is amazing. I know people don't like to hear that word because it's about murder, but it's an amazing feat of what they accomplished. It took years to get this up and running. And Israel showed all, how earlier we talked about, the capabilities of Israel.
I was going to go back. Yeah.
Well, this is one of those capabilities. What the patience, the insight, the knowledge. They had to dedicate people's careers for this. There were people who made a career out of just this operation. Because you have to have cover stories, you have to engage in covert activity. And what I mean by that is covertly be a business person, to actually become a real business person, to insinuate yourself into the system so that when people see you, they recognize you as a legitimate part of the system. You have to be so good that you get into the Hezbollah procurement cycle, that you get Hezbollah to buy your pagers. This again shows a tremendous amount of insight.
Took years.
They say up to
sure.
15 years, yeah. And it cost millions of dollars to do this, millions of dollars to do this. So, which now brings us to the question of then why did Israel do it at this time? Because as soon as Israel blew up these pagers, that entire program is compromised. Careers are ruined, are over. People's lives are put at risk. You exposed everything. This wasn't the knockout blow. I mean, this was more like an act of political desperation by Netanyahu to seize the headlines, to generate headlines that showed that he was capable of inflicting harm on Hezbollah at a time when he's losing with Hamas. But for something of that, I don't know how old you are, and it's none of my business. A man never asked a lady her age, but I would imagine that you were not alive, or if you were very young when the Entebbe rescue took place in 1976, I believe. The rescue of the Air France passengers in Entebbe, Uganda, by Israeli commandos. I was. And all we talked about for a year afterwards was that rescue. Every day, how the Israelis pulled it off, what they did. And as a kid, I was a kid. I wasn't, but I was 16 years old. And as a 16-year-old kid, I'm sitting there reading everything. I'm like, oh my God, what did the Israelis do? It became romanticized. It became this. No one's talking about the pagers today. No one's talking about the pagers.
They were saving hostages, their own people. Here we're talking about, again, indiscriminate killings and
right. But still, the Israelis, you would think,
are you talking about the
would be talking about how great this was, how wonderful this was. But nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Because it was a gimmick.
Yeah.
It was a gimmick. Just like, with all due respect, I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the murder of Hassan Nasrallah was a gimmick. It's a one-time thing.
Yeah.
Okay, you put 83 bombs, 2,000-pound bombs into a given area, and you collapsed the tunnel and you killed the man.
Yeah.
Yay, Israel. Fantastic. Now, who's talking about it today? No one. Because Hezbollah has not been defeated. Hezbollah still is resisting. Hezbollah is firing missiles. Hezbollah launched the drone that got through the missile defense shield. Hezbollah is raining death on Haifa in Galilee every day. Netanyahu's promise to return the 60,000 to the northern settlements is an empty promise, because you can't return 60,000 people to places that are being shelled on a daily basis, and Israel doesn't have the solution to stop the shelling. It's only going to get worse. Did they not learn anything from 2006? So no one's talking about the pagers. No one's talking about the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. These are supposed to be game-changing events. Exactly. One would think that if you blow up the pagers and you kill Nasrallah, Hezbollah collapses, but it didn't happen.
What does this mean? Does this mean again that the Israelis have fallen short on their calculations?
I think what happened is politics. I think Netanyahu was desperate to get a headline, desperate to be seen as doing something.
And to secure himself another little period of his political survival, because let's not forget of all the continuous demonstrations in the hundreds of thousands in the streets.
But that's why
that again they don't put out.
I think that's why he set off the pagers, because the day before you have 200,000 people in the streets calling for his head. And he's now going before a cabinet that's debating whether or not he should invade. You know, he's saying we need to invade Lebanon, and his military is saying that's insane. So what does he do? Calls up the Mossad, says blow up the pagers.
It's
and
crazy.
Remember the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. He was at the United Nations.
Exactly.
And he had just been briefed that Hassan Nasrallah was seeking a ceasefire.
That he had agreed to the ceasefire,
brokered was in the bunker to finalize those arrangements.
Yeah.
When Netanyahu killed him, murdered him. Yeah.
He didn't want to keep his end of the ceasefire deal. Maybe
he just wanted the headlines. He was never going to keep the ceasefire deal. He was never going to. But see, by killing Nasrallah, no one's talking about the ceasefire deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which would have been huge for the developments in the region.
Could have led to peace, but it would have been problematic for Netanyahu, because peace is Netanyahu's worst enemy.
There's all these trials waiting for him to happen.
That's right. If there's peace, his coalition collapses, he gets arrested, he goes on trial, he goes to jail. So he will continue to keep war in the mix.
It's hundreds and thousands of people who are dying indiscriminately for the ego of a man or a couple of people around him. This is unfathomable. It's unconscionable.
I've never been to Beirut, but I have a family there right now. That
a Lebanese family.
A Lebanese family. The lady's name is Alina. She's actually from Lugansk in Ukraine. She married a Lebanese man, and they have two wonderful daughters. The girls, thank goodness, are in Europe, but she and her husband are in Beirut.
Are they close to the Dahir area?
No, they're not. But they're.
It's tiny. Beirut is cramped, so
your building shake.
Oh yes. I'm getting the same from my friends and relatives, that it's nonstop earthquakes and tremors, and
every day I text them just to ask, "Are you okay? Are you okay?"
Even up in the mountains, they hear them, they feel them.
Yeah,
crazy. I was gonna ask you, considering how this past Sunday, the attack by Hezbollah, the dateless attack by Hezbollah in their history and in Israel's history, where they sent a drone to the Golani Brigade and there were the 4 deaths and all these injured, over 60. How come Hezbollah, in your view, hasn't crumbled despite Nasrallah and all the top brass being taken out in a matter of just a few weeks? It's completely thrown everyone, not us, but when you live the situation over the decades, you know that Hezbollah isn't just a top echelon and that's it.
Look, Hezbollah is a resistance organization, and it's organized to.
That's how they started out.
Pardon?
That's how they
started out. Right. They're also a political organization now, and like any political organization, the decision-making tends to gravitate to the top, but it still has a core resistance function. And I look, no organization in this world could take the hits that Hezbollah took and not have some loss of efficiency. Just as the Israelis on October 7th were in shock and they took time to recover, I would imagine that Hezbollah was in shock and has taken time to recover. It's a heavy blow at what they've been suffering, but look at them today. they're back. They're back in business. They're operating. They haven't skipped a beat, and they're just going to get better and better and better and better. Because now I think what happened is, under Nasrallah, he had been playing a game of escalation management, a very difficult political game of how to prevent the war from getting out of control, how to just do limited escalation, etc., while focusing on, because he has a duty and responsibility to the Lebanese people, not just to the Shia, but to the Lebanese people, because Hezbollah is a political party that is part of the Lebanese government. And so he can't get Lebanon dragged into this conflict willy-nilly. And so I think there was this dance going on that made Hezbollah believe that they're not yet at war. And suddenly overnight they find themselves at war. But Nasrallah is dead. His deputy's dead. Their senior leadership's dead. Everybody's dead.
Yeah.
Thousands of people are wounded because of the pagers. And there's a hesitancy. Do we go to war? On whose authority? How do we begin to do what we're supposed to do? And so it took Hezbollah a moment to regroup, but they've regrouped.
Yeah.
And now Hezbollah is at war, and Israel is going to pay a price, because this is a war that Hezbollah has been preparing for 18 years.
Oh,
They
yes.
have planned out. Everything's planned out. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know what Israel can do. The Hezbollah is one of the more professional resistance militaries in the world. I mean, their military is as professional as any regional military on an individual capacity. These guys study their enemy. They know what the Israelis can do. They've made preparations. They know Israel has airplanes. They know Israel has bombs. So they've built defenses designed to be bombed and to survive. If Israel captured a tunnel near the border, it's because Hezbollah let them capture a tunnel. And when Hezbollah makes a decision that they're not going to let Israel capture a tunnel, Israel will find out the hard way.
You're leading me to my next question about the discovery by the IDF of tunnels directly reaching under Israeli villages in northern Israel. So in hindsight, does it seem that Nasrallah displayed restraint this past year? What do you think?
100%. Hezbollah always said that the next war will be fought in Israel. And I still think that will be the case. As Israel has learned the hard way in Gaza, just because you found one tunnel doesn't mean you found them all. And I believe that Hezbollah has many more tunnels that will come into Israeli villages and Israeli towns. And then when the time is right, when the Israeli army has been committed into southern Lebanon, gets fixed by Hezbollah, and are now trapped, Hezbollah will come in behind and create chaos in the Israeli rear. That's the war that Hezbollah has been planning to fight. But Nasrallah, never pulled that trigger, because I don't believe Nasrallah wanted a war. I think
what you said,
Nasrallah,
the controlled escalation.
yeah,
What he was doing this past year, he could have used those tunnels, but he didn't.
he didn't. It's very restrained. Yeah. If he was a terrorist organization,
of all his faults, we have to also mention this.
Yeah, I mean, again, if nobody's perfect. I understand, Hezbollah within Lebanon, there are complicated politics. They're not my politics, so
it's
I
more
don't
the politics with the Lebanese,
Right,
the Lebanese that have an issue with them. Yeah.
Right. But so, for instance, an outsider like me might romanticize Hassan Nasrallah and put him on a pedestal and say he's capable. But if I lived in Lebanon, and maybe if I were more intimately familiar with the day-to-day realities of Hezbollah, maybe Hassan Nasrallah wouldn't be on that pedestal. I fully understand that.
I understand what you're saying as a military person, their tactics, the way they operate, how they've become actually the strongest paramilitary army in the world, compatible to an actual professional army. these are the sort of cases that as a military person, you would love to study and examine for tens and hundreds of years down the line, just like people are still studying Alexander the Great and his feat and his series, because I'm also half Greek. So I understand what you're saying. And it's true
I
what
don't
you're
want to
saying.
pretend that I know. I don't want to pretend that um, that I can speak in an intelligent, informed fashion about the realities of Lebanese politics. I cannot. I'm
Thank you for
familiar with
that.
it. I know the people involved. I know the names. I've studied the history. But reading about something in a book
Yeah.
and experiencing it firsthand are two totally different things. And that's why I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole, because I saw the look in your eye, the flash in your eyes when I talked about Hezbollah as a political party. And I was like, I'm not going there because I'm not equipped to go there. I don't have the personal experience. I don't have firsthand experience. And I'm in no position to add to anything that you know about Lebanon. You know it. I don't. I'll leave it at that. So, but Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah is a man who, for instance, I have a very good friend. You probably heard of his name, Seymour Hersh,
Yes.
the Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist. He just wrote a piece in his Substack about the meetings that he's had with Hassan Nasrallah over the years. Um, and he has met Hassan Nasrallah many times. And he holds Hassan Nasrallah in the highest esteem. He thinks of him as a master, political strategist and things of that nature. And so, again, from my perspective, a man who I deeply respect, Seymour Hersh, writes about Hassan Nasrallah. That's how I get my education. But I think that, you know, I think Nabi Berri might have a different interpretation. I think Aoun might have. I think other people might have a different interpretation, and those all have to be respected because Lebanon is an extremely complicated space. The history of Lebanon and its politics requires a PhD just to
Oh yes,
begin to understand.
even with us. So you're right. But the truth has to be told that the majority of Lebanese do consider Hezbollah and refer to them as freedom fighters. They're the ones who expelled the Israelis back in 2000. I happen to have been there at the time, again, attending, like you would have been in 2006, a 2000 conference that was organized for the first time by the government. It was the first Lebanese expat international conference in Lebanon, where they wanted to draw all the Lebanese expats from all over the world, because we're spread all over. We were selectively were selected who were invited to go, and it was a big conference hosted by the president at the time and the prime minister. And I attended with my father and with Lebanese from Brazil and all over the world. And we were in the middle of Beirut, and all of a sudden we see Israeli tanks being paraded in the streets of Beirut and people waving Lebanese flags on them. And for a moment, I got scared. I didn't know what was happening. And my dad's like, so we were there when history unfolded.
Yeah.
They got the tanks and they drove them all the way up from southern Lebanon into the street. And people were idolizing Hezbollah because they were saying, it's not the Lebanese army who did this. It's not the Lebanese army who achieved this from 1982, when they set foot on our lands, on our soil. And now it's 2000. So interesting how the conversation has
I would have
evolved.
something a humorous aside related to this. I was in Russia this past earlier this year, and I visited the new territories, and so I was in Donetsk, and I had a meeting with Denis Pushilin, who is the governor of Donetsk. So we're just having a conversation, but he was telling a story about how one day he was sitting in his office, and he looked out in the street, and two tanks come by, and they have Ukrainian flags on them, and he's like, "Oh no, has it come to this? Do I have to run? What?" They were filming a movie, and
Okay.
and so the two tanks were supposed to be Ukrainian tanks, but they're filming a movie. But Denis Pushilin, the governor, didn't realize it, and when he saw the two tanks, he's like, "Oh dear,
Yeah.
I guess we lost."
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about UNIFIL. UNIFIL, how Netanyahu has openly now threatened them to withdraw the service personnel from South Lebanon. And you're not talking about a small number. You're talking about 10,500 service personnel. And UNIFIL has declined to do so because it refused, because it violates their mandate. But apparently, Israel can now use chemical weapons against UN forces. And it's all part of the game. And only Spain and France have, from the big powers of the West, have called for a worldwide ban on arms sales to Israel, but you get nothing from the UK when it comes to this. You're talking about UN forces and nothing from the US, obviously. They use chemical weapons against UNIFIL.
Look, the international community has disgraced itself and debased itself when it comes to Israel. First of all, when Netanyahu was lecturing the Secretary General about UNIFIL, he's lecturing the wrong person. The Secretary General has no authority over UNIFIL. UNIFIL was created by the Security Council of the United Nations. That means that the United States voted for this. So Israel, in standing up to UNIFIL, is standing up to the United States. It's standing up to Russia. It's standing up to France, China, Great Britain, all the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. What are they doing? Where are their voices? Why aren't they shouting out? Because this is a direct affront to them and everything they stand for. Back in the 1990s, when the Bosnian Serbs started to violently confront the United Nations forces in Bosnia, a decision was made to militarily intervene to defend the UN forces. I think it's time that the United Nations Security Council authorize the use of military force for the defense of United Nations personnel. If Israel wants a war with the world, then let's give Israel the war that they want. And I don't think that powers like Spain, France, Italy need to wait for any permission. This is a United Nations body, and Israel should be put on notice that if you continue to attack the United Nations will hold you to account, and that means the different members of the United Nations. Israel can't be allowed to get away with this wanton disregard for international law. And to put these peacekeepers' lives at risk. I know Israel has a problem with UNIFIL. I understand that. I understand that they feel that UNIFIL hasn't done its job, that UNIFIL has somehow turned a blind eye to Hezbollah's activities and things of that nature. But I think it's more complicated than that. It's not, we have to stop buying at face value the Israeli narrative and understand that there's an other side to the story, and there are legalities and things that have to be play. UNIFIL is a stabilizing force. And if you withdraw UNIFIL, all it does is give Israel carte blanche to terrorize the villages of southern Lebanon and to kill thousands of more innocent Lebanese civilians. That's it. And right now, UNIFIL has to be viewed as an organization that's saving lives. Their continued presence in southern Lebanon is saving the lives of the southern Lebanese, of the Shia that live there, of other it's a predominantly Shia area, but it's not exclusively. There are other communities there. So we'll just call them Lebanese. And Israel will murder these Lebanese in significant numbers if UNIFIL were to withdraw. And this is one of those fights that the world should be ready to have. This is a good fight against an evil nation. And Israel is an evil nation right now, behaving in total disregard of international law.
Thank you for that. At the moment, though, southern Lebanon, because people are only talking about northern Israel and the 60,000 residents who've evacuated the area for 1 year now, southern Lebanon is also void of its inhabitants. Yep. There's 1 million Lebanese who are refugees in their own country. They've been displaced. And over the last 12 months, Israel was relentlessly bombing southern Lebanon. And actually even performing non-stop phosphorus attacks that devastated all agricultural livelihoods there, because southern Lebanon is a primarily agricultural economy. So, I mean, yes, UNIFIL was really just caught in the middle, but still their physical presence proved a deterrent to both. And I wanted to ask your
I
opinion on
just want to reiterate the point that you made, just so maybe for an American audience. I don't know how far this is going to be seen. Hopefully, if I get the link, I'll share it to 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 my audience as well. But you know that what you said is so important, and it just doesn't register.
what.
Netanyahu has made a big deal of 60,000 um, northern settlers, a big deal. He's willing to go to war for them. Okay, who's talking about the million southern Lebanese?
Okay.
No one. Not a single You're the first person that I've
I
heard talk about
I
this.
noticed that in all the podcasts that you've been invited, no one asks you about it. It's always about the 60,000.
But I will guarantee you from now on, I will mention the million
Thank you for that.
because it's so important.
I
Because
when
it's, yeah,
we're not
it's a
asking
million
for
people.
selective information to be put out, we're asking for equal and balanced.
The truth. You just want the
Yeah,
truth.
yeah.
If we're going to speak of the 60,000 Israelis, and again, as a human being, my heart goes out to everybody. You have a home, you have a family, you're displaced from that. It's disruptive. It's bad. We all want peace. We all want stability. We all want harmony. Um, but what about the million Lebanese? I mean, don't they want peace and harmony too? Don't they want stability? Do not their lives matter? Does not their livelihood matter? But apparently they don't. And this gets into the larger picture of what I've talked about. And I don't mean to insult anybody, and I hope I certainly am not insulting you. Um, but the racism, this is the flagrant racism that exists in the United States about Arabs. Um, they aren't people. They
I
aren't people.
I experienced it living there. But I would always engage in a conversation, and because they equate, and I love Americans. My happiest years were my years in America, studying in America. I swear to God. And I'm not talking about the people who were with me in university. I'm talking about people who are with me outside the university. They would hear Arab, and this was prior 9/11. They would hear Arab, and they equate in their mind Arab, ragheads, Muslims. We're talking about a surface area. If you talk about Arabs or Arab-speaking countries and nations, 13 million square kilometers. You're talking North Africa, Arabian Peninsula, Gulf, Middle East, and Sub-Saharan Africa. So 30 million square kilometers and 350, 400 million inhabitants. And it's an amalgamation, a melting pot of cultures, of civilizations. Some of the oldest civilizations in the world started in our area.
Yeah.
And definitely, if I'm going to talk about Lebanon, Lebanon is the epitome of a melting pot. It's not America. There are 18 recognized religions in Lebanon. Most of the Christian religions are present in Lebanon. It's negligent to assume that all Arabs are Muslim. Lebanon hosts nearly all the Christian denominations, and Canaan in Lebanon is the place where Jesus performed his first miracle. Lebanon is littered with churches and monasteries, not to mention all the other religions there. So you're right, and I'm very sad to hear that racism vis-a-vis Arabs still exists to a strong point in America, as I experienced a few decades ago.
It's horrible. I mean, even I mean, look, people who are aware are aware. But I get angry when people, for instance, when we speak of Lebanon, um, there will be Americans that will say, well, are they Christian? And so they go, yes, oh, well, then they're okay. But if they're Muslim, they're not okay. So somehow there's a difference between Christians and Muslims in terms of, what's a good Arab and what's a bad Arab. But even the Christians aren't real Christians because at the end of the day, they're Arabs.
They're Arabs.
They're Arabs. And so, when we talk about, that's why we can sit there and get bent out of shape over 60,000 Israeli settlers, but not even blink an eye at 1 million displaced Lebanese. It's amazing because, as you said, they're ragheads, they're camel jockeys, they're sand, you know what.
They're terrorists. They're terrorists.
Automatically. Well, if you're Muslim, you're a terrorist.
You're terrorists. No, if you're an Arab, you're a terrorist.
Well, yes, because it's in your DNA. Don't you know that? Haven't you studied your own DNA?
Mr. Ritter, no, I understand, but we're talking about the Lebanese and how the 1 million are not getting any mention of and how they've been dehumanized. But the most tragic dehumanization is happening with the Palestinian, especially. My heart breaks for the children and the women. The West dehumanizes Arabs. They're treating the death toll in Gaza as mere statistics, just numbers, which are likely double because of all the bodies not found under the rubble. 70% of buildings in Gaza have been pulverized, and Palestinian dead are more than just numbers. They reflect a contempt and racism. Why does the West remain silent when Lebanese people die, when Palestinian civilians die in their, not tens of thousands, it's in the hundreds of thousands?
This is one of the hardest questions in the world to answer because it requires to look in yourself. I consider myself to be a fairly open-minded person. But I'll be the first to admit, when I traveled to Israel extensively from 1994 to 1998, I was blind and indifferent to the Palestinians. I was there in Israel. I knew the Palestinians existed. I'm not an ignorant man. I was familiar with, the issues. But every time I was there, between 94 and 98, at least one and sometimes two and three Hamas terrorist attacks took place against the Israelis. And so I was conditioned to think of the Israelis as the victims and the Palestinians as the victimizers. And that's the mindset I had. I remember in the lead up to the Gulf War in 1991 how Saddam Hussein had aligned himself with the Palestinian people. And of course, I went to war against Saddam's Iraq. And so the Palestinian people became an extension of my concept of the enemy. So in my heart, there wasn't much room for me to say, I'm open to this. I admit this. I was indifferent to their plight. And I didn't really become, because even in the lead up to October 7th, many of the people that were part of the anti-war coalition opposing the war in Iraq were also part of the pro-Palestinian movement. And they would participate in trips to Gaza, trips to the West Bank to respond to Israeli aggression. And I was invited to go on several of these, and I didn't because I just didn't feel comfortable with it. It wasn't my passion point. I'm not going to say that I was racist because I don't view myself as a racist person, but I will say that I was, my indifference comes from a place of a lack of compassion.
Ignorance at the time.
It's more than ignorance. It's not even ignorance because I won't call myself ignorant. I don't want to use the term, but it is racism. The fact is that I was prejudiced against the Palestinians for whatever reason.
It's complete. Tell me.
But after October 7th, when the Israelis, because I had been critical of Israel leading up to this, very critical of Israel, in particular towards Lebanon. For whatever reason, again, I put the Lebanese in a category where I could feel empathy and compassion, but the Palestinians I had regulated to this area of indifference. Because of Hamas, I have to be honest, because of the fact that I was in Israel when Hamas terrorist attack took place. They blew up a restaurant that I had just eaten at. They blew up a bus depot. They blew up a shopping mall. They blew up a discotheque underneath my hotel. I know they weren't trying to target me, but you take it personally when things go boom nearby. But after October 7th, I started to become so sickened by what the Israelis were doing that for the first time, I looked at the Palestinians as people for the first time. And I said, okay. Oh my God. Wow. And then it's amazing. Once you view them as people, then their history resonates. I knew what the Nakba was. I knew what the Nakba was, but it never resonated. I mean, I used to travel to Jordan, and I would meet with Ali Shukri. He was the advisor to the King of Jordan, and I'd come from Israel, uh, and uh, and then I would go back, and he would always say, "Where are you staying?" And I say, "Well, I'm staying in Tel Aviv." And he'd say, "Oh, when you get a chance, go to Jaffa." And he would say, "My father's from there, and if you could just check on the birthplace
Wow.
of my home." And I did, but it just was. But suddenly, the whole history of and once you acknowledge the Palestinian people as human beings, and their history now becomes the history of equals,
Exactly.
then you start to realize the evil that has been done to them and who has done this evil to them. And it changes everything. I went from being somebody who used to actively support Israel to somebody who became indifferent, but still sympathetic, to somebody who now openly despises Israel. And to be honest, the Israelis. Because you can't, once you acknowledge the history, then you can no longer forgive the Israeli people for what their government has done to the Palestinians. The
We're
Israeli
not
people,
talking about the people. We're talking about the government.
correct, but the
Always.
people
Yes.
allow the government to do this, and the people, when you realize that the Israelis set up lawn chairs and cheered as Gaza was
Yes.
being, um, and then you listen to the Israelis as they respond to this action and the way they collectively refer to the Palestinians as less than humans and animal, as they explain away the murders, and and then suddenly the names matter.
Yes.
And when you say the name of Hind Rajab,
Yes. That story, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching,
I mean,
gut-wrenching.
and
The
then
poor girl.
God, here I am, talking names, and I can't say his name because to be honest, I forgot it already. Um, but the the young man that burned to death in that camp the other day,
Yeah.
and we watched him.
I
We
believe
watched
I
him.
believe there were four of them.
There were
And it,
right, but
yeah.
I remember they're talking about him,
Yeah.
and and his, he's a musician, and every life is precious. But then when you see the potential that's there, and you realize what he was doing and what a good man he was, and what potential he had to burn to death in front of us alive on TV, and the Israelis get away with it and don't reflect on it and aren't held accountable to it. Yeah, I can't forgive Israel for what they've done.
We are all humans living on this small blue dot in the universe. We are all from the same human race. You cannot consider people to be inferior to others and refer to them as the Israeli Defense Minister Gallant and apologetically refer to the Palestinians as non-humans or animals. It's
No.
inconceivable. You wouldn't hear anyone from the Palestinian side, any leader, any minister, any general, or from the Lebanese, or even Hezbollah side, talk about civilians, about civilians, unarmed civilians who are indiscriminately being collectively killed in the most horrendous, excruciating manner with those terms. I'd like
There's
us.
a movie called Clockwork Orange, it's an old Stanley Kubrick movie. But in it, it's basically about psychopaths who commit mindless crimes, and then they're being rehabilitated, and they have to sit there and watch the crimes. And I fantasize sometimes about all these Israelis being compelled to listen to Hind Rajab's phone call over and over and over and over again.
Not clips of it. The
The
3 hour
thing.
phone call.
That's right.
3 hours, that poor girl.
Yes.
And they were trying to get clearance as a Red Crescent from the IDF to approach her and save her while she was in the car with all her family dead next to her. 3
They did
hours.
the two paramedics got permission, then the Israelis murdered them.
Murdered them too.
Yeah. No, every Israeli should be compelled to listen to this nonstop every hour of every day for the rest of their lives. That should be their punishment.
We all are humans. We all have blood flowing through our veins. Nothing differentiates us from others. And this is maybe where I want to take it to. My following questions. What's your opinion on the new map that Netanyahu has shared regarding the new Middle East? Are we witnessing a new Sykes-Picot for the Middle East? And if I can further on that, since we're talking about, people considering themselves to be, better than others or higher in race than others. We're witnessing also the peak of AIPAC's influence, which you had mentioned in previous other podcasts that you were approached by them when you resigned your position as a UN arms inspector. We've seen a peak of their influence and a grab in all aspects of US politics. And considering how AIPAC is Zionism's arm, whose dogma is extremist, to put it mildly, and the only lobby group that aggressively represents another nation's desires onto US politics, that no US president, other than JFK, who tried to but was cut short of doing so, dared touch them or require them to list under the Foreign Agents Act. So your comment, please, on the map and whether you think there's any possibility whatsoever to rid the US from AIPAC's influence.
I mean, the map is, I think, an expression of Israeli arrogance, and their biblically derived notion of supremacy, that they are the chosen ones. That's the only way you can explain the insanity of this map, because this map makes no sense from a legal standpoint, from a humanitarian standpoint, from any rational standpoint, because to implement this map would require the displacement of literally 100 million people. And this would be the violent displacement. But again, they're just Arabs, so it doesn't matter. They're just a statistic. They're not human beings. They have no emotions, no ties to the land. If you kill an Arab child, those Arabs will go out and make another child. They don't really care about their children like we care about our children. If their grandparents die, well, they're just old people, and I mean, that's the indifference we show to this. Fortunately, the Arab world, I can't say the Arab world, fortunately, aspects of the region have stood up and said no. The resistance in Lebanon, the resistance in Gaza, the resistance in Syria and Iraq, led by Iran, the participation of the Houthi, this map will never manifest itself. It's a fiction. There's another movie, A Downfall. It's a German movie about the last days of Adolf Hitler in his bunker. And there's a scene where Hitler is in the bunker, leaning over a map, moving imaginary armies. And that's Netanyahu with his map. It's an imaginary map. It's an imaginary land. It exists only in his mind, and it will never reach fruition. Israel is a defeated nation as we speak. Israel has been strategically defeated already. If you take a look at the world and how the world treated Israel on October 6th, and compare and contrast with how the world is treating Israel today, Israel is a strategically defeated nation. On October 6th, who was talking about the creation of a Palestinian homeland? Nobody. Today, everybody. It's part of it's mandatorily included in all talk about how to solve this problem. There must be a Palestinian state. This is a strategic defeat for not just Israel, but Netanyahu's Israel, because Netanyahu has said there will never be a Palestine. So already Netanyahu suffered a strategic defeat. Economically, Israel is a basket case. And I believe the economic harm that's been done to Israel is irrecoverable. On October 6th, Israel was living in a fantasy world where the India, Middle East, European economic corridor was going to make Israel the most relevant nation in the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu bragged about it, said it is one of the most important events to take place in modern Middle East history. It's one of the greatest moments in Israel's history. The greatest moment in Israel's history is the creation of this imaginary economic corridor that was going to make Israel relevant for once, independent of American aid, standing on its own 2 feet. That's gone forever. It will never happen. Israel will never be relevant. Israel will always be an apartheid state, permanently recognized as that, which is the kiss of death. because this means that if Israel ever is going to seek to become part of the international community, it must cease being an apartheid state, which means there must be, at a minimum, a two-state solution, something Netanyahu said will never happen. But the reality is there won't be a two-state solution, because in order for there to be a two-state solution, Israel will have to go to war with itself. This is the fatal mistake that Netanyahu has done in taking his extremism that's manifested in that map and trying to make it reality. The West Bank settlers, these criminals, I call them Brooklyn Jews, who come in from the United States specifically to steal the land of the Palestinians, to steal their homes, to murder them, to commit horrific crimes
They are
in
given
order
arms. They are given arms by the state when they are given the land.
and this is again one of the fatal mistakes that the state has made, because now they've armed this criminal gang. And if Israel is going to recover from this devastating situation it finds itself in, it will have to embark on a path that speaks of the creation of a Palestinian homeland. There will not be a Palestinian homeland without the West Bank, which means the stolen lands must be returned to the Palestinians. And the process of dismantling these settlements will cause Israel to go to war with itself. There will be a civil war. These settlers are armed. They will resist violently. And once Israel gets into business of fighting amongst itself, it's over. The Israeli dream, the land of milk and honey, has disappeared, and you will see a demographic shift as Israelis flee Israel. And when the number of Jews in Israel drops to a certain level, demographically, it becomes impossible to talk about a Jewish homeland. And now we're talking about a one-state solution, with that state being called Palestine, not Israel. That's the direction we're heading. Netanyahu doesn't realize it, but he has created the conditions for the end of Israel. And I truly believe that Israel will not exist in its current configuration in a decade's time, that Israel has committed fatal mistakes that it can't get out from under. The crimes it has committed, its wanton disregard for international law, will come back to haunt it in the very near future.
Excellent analysis once again. I'm just hanging from every word that comes out of your mouth. It's definitely hard for a lot of people to even foresee what you just said, but you lay it out with all the steps and the logic that it makes sense. It won't happen without fight and lots of people getting killed. And
Yeah.
it's sad, but excellent
That's
analysis there.
the only thing, again, I say this as somebody who's
Very sad.
physically disassociated from this, but what price freedom? That's a question people have to ask. What price freedom? When we speak of the Lebanese, of the Palestinians, remember when I said the veil was removed and I saw them as people?
Yes.
The first thing that happens when you see them as people is a term that comes, I think Sinwar, the current head of Hamas, uses this term, children of the camps. And he speaks of, the reality of being born into an open air concentration camp. And you're either the third or fourth generation born there. And what that means is, let's say the people who were the initial victims of the Nakba were taken to Gaza. All right. They recognize that their lands have been stolen, but they live on the hope of the promise of return, that they will return. So they start a family because they have the hope that if they can't return, their children will be able to return. And so that's what they live for. That's what they struggle for. But then they grow old. That doesn't happen. They die. Now, their children who were born in the camp now raise up, but they remember the grandparents saying there is hope. So they have hope. They start a family. And they start the family in hopes that they will be able to return to their homes, but they too are disappointed. They grow old. They die. This next generation comes up and they've lost hope because they didn't know the grandparents very well. Their parents, they're frustrated with their parents because they say you gave up fighting. You didn't fight for this hard enough. You believed in something. And they become resistance oriented. And then they have children. And that's this generation right now of Palestinians. These are the children of the camp. And they understand that if they don't resist, they will die in this camp. And They also understand that they have children and they don't resist. Those children will die in this camp. That is their fate. It is a permanent fate of those who do not resist to die in this camp. So how do you break this wheel? You resist. And what is the price of resistance? Death. Lots of death. Palestine will not be born without the deaths of Palestinians. Just like France would not be liberated. I use this analogy, and I probably irritate people, but Charles de Gaulle was briefed by Dwight D. Eisenhower in the months leading up to the D-Day invasion, the Normandy landings. He said, look, we're going in. We're going to begin the process of liberating France, but we're going to be launching bombing campaigns. And the battles themselves, we're probably going to kill between 60 and 120,000 French civilians just in the Normandy campaign alone. And de Gaulle said, okay. And he signed off on it.
Yeah.
De Gaulle never attended a D-Day anniversary.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't. His heart was broken because he had signed off on the death of so many French people. But he also knew that without that sacrifice, France would never be liberated. France would never be free. So when people criticize Hamas and say, how dare you begin this process, understand this. There will never be a Palestine if the Palestinians don't defeat the Israelis, and you will never defeat the Israelis on military terms alone. You cannot stand up to the Israeli military and win. You defeat the Israelis politically. You defeat them economically. You create the conditions for the Israelis to show the world who they are. And that's what's happening here. Every Palestinian that's martyred shows the world the evil nature of the Israeli regime. And the more the Palestinians die, the more the world learns that Israel is a nation incompatible with civilized life. And this is the hope. For the first time in many generations, the children of the camp can look in the mirror and say, our children will be free.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that amazing analysis once again. Sometimes it's hard when you're on the other end, not me personally, but Palestinians, for them to even believe in what you're saying. I'm sure it's very hard for them. But again, there's a lot of logic in what you explained. And we're not wishing ill or death to anyone for the rights to be, for the wrongs to be righted. I wanted to ask you.
You're a much nicer person than I am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Because I, unfortunately, am a man of violence. And in my heart, I have justified the use of violence. I agree with you that we shouldn't do that, but I know how dark my heart is, and I know where my heart can take me. And thank God there's better people than me making decisions, because I cannot forgive the Israelis for the murder of Hind Rajab and 60 to 140,000 others, innocents who have been murdered by the Israelis. I can't forgive them.
I wanted to touch upon the US elections. It's clear that the neocons have a deep influence in both the Democratic and Republican parties. I had asked you earlier also about AIPAC, if you see any possibility that the US can rid AIPAC's influence from the political sphere, at least in the decision-making sphere. And when it comes to neocons, they also have a deep influence in both parties. So why would the US election results matter to people in the region here? We see all the infightings and all these, like, it's ridiculous what's happening, on TV and how they present both candidates. And for us, it's like it's the same coin. It's the same coin. And yeah, if you can just elaborate on that briefly, if you want.
Well, the fact of the matter is the pro-Israeli lobby has an iron grip on the American body politic, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's just the sad state of affairs. It's very difficult for somebody to enter into mainstream national politics without selling their soul to the pro-Israeli lobby. There are some jurisdictions that are demographically able to resist this. This is how we get, representatives in Michigan and elsewhere. I think it's I'm horrible with names. The lady from Michigan,
Gretchen Whitmer.
no. She's the
No.
governor.
Okay.
The representative, Rashida Tlaib.
Bravo. Yes. With the
Yeah.
head covered.
So she's
Rashida.
she's able to get reelected because she has a unique demographic that is of large percentage of Arab Americans who, so she can survive not taking the Israeli money. But in most places, you have to take the Israeli money to avoid just what they call being primaried. In America, before you get on the ballot, you have to go through a primary election. And the cheapest way to destroy somebody politically is to make them run through a primary challenge. It bankrupts them, and it causes them to have to fight where their opponent is going to smear them, damage them. And so they enter the major election already damaged. And then the other side has a tendency to win. And so you don't want to be primaried. And so it's a threat. It's a threat. Support us or we will primary you.
So you sell your soul.
So they sell their soul. And again, because we come down to, what's wrong with helping the Israelis? They're just like us. It's like the 51st state. I went to visit Israel and they took me on a tour and I saw all the beautiful things and how they are just like us. They eat just like we do. They tell the jokes like we do. They have many people who speak with the same accent I do because they come from America. They're just like us. And then there's them, those Arabs. They're not like us. They live over there and their villages are dirty. And we've seen them come in and they're terrorists. They blow things up. They're not to be trusted at all. So why shouldn't I take the Israeli money? Why shouldn't I have them help me? Because we're the same. It's not a problem. That's the way they think. They don't understand that the Israelis have no use for the United States other than to use us to protect them. They don't care about us. They're not our friends. They attacked the USS Liberty in 1967, killing American sailors, wounding American sailors. Jonathan Pollard spied against us, stole our deepest, darkest secrets, and gave them to the Israelis, who then sold them to the Soviets in exchange for immigration. So the Israelis sold us down they spy on us consistently. The number one espionage threat we face in America today doesn't come from Russia, doesn't come from China, doesn't come from Iran. It comes from Israel, who spies on everything we do. That's just the reality of it. Israel is not our friend. But now we're so deep into their pockets that
but the Arabs fought alongside the West in World War One, when they were still not nation states. They were promised their freedom, the creation of their nation states, but somehow this is disregarded. Americans don't know about this. It's just
we saw Lawrence of Arabia. We watched the movie. I'm joking, but I'm saying that that's our understanding. That's as deep as it goes. We don't understand the depth of betrayal of the of the Arabs by the British, by the French, and indirectly by Woodrow Wilson, who promoted these compromises in the lead up to the creation of the League of Nations, et cetera, the various mandates that were created. But here's the good news, though. Israel is a defeated nation. It's going to be very difficult for the pro-Israeli lobby to survive intact going forward, because what they're asking the American people to support is unsupportable. At some point in time, the horror of what Israel has done will resonate, will come home. And we're already seeing an impact on American policy. We can no longer just be totally indifferent to the crimes of Israel. We are now compelled to tell the Israelis they have to provide humanitarian aid. At some point in time, we'll be compelled for them to. And the reason why isn't because we suddenly woke up and said, "Oh my God, Arab lives matter." They don't. We don't care about the Arabs. We don't care about America. And see, America right now is in an existential struggle with BRICS. There's a summit taking place in a week or so time in Kazan, Russia. It's a summit where Russia, India, and China are going to bring together the global South, the developing nations. Egypt is a member of BRICS. Saudi Arabia was invited last year. Who knows what they're going to do this year? Iran is a member. The United Arab Emirates is a member. Ethiopia is a member. New nations might join. Turkey wants to be a member. Malaysia, everybody's coming there. And the United States is seeing that the rules-based international order that we've relied upon to rule over the globe since the end of the Second World War is collapsing. It's collapsing. And in order for us to mitigate this collapse, to slow it down, to try and bring control, we need to bring the developing world, the global South, to us, not to BRICS, to us. But they're looking at Israel and what Israel's doing in America's blanket support of Israel, and they're leaving us. And at some point in time, we're going to have to face up to the fact that Israel is destroying America internationally. We already have had ambassadors from around the world writing to the State Department saying, hey guys, we might as well shut down the embassy because they won't talk to us anymore because of what's going on in Israel. Our support of Israel has damaged us permanently in the world today. And as we recognize the need for the United States to do something different to counter BRICS, to change our political posture on a geopolitical level, it's going to require us to hold Israel to account in order to attract support. So the Israelis are going to find out a hard lesson that we can be bought when it's convenient to be bought. We're just like everybody else. It was convenient to be bought by Israel. It was easy money. It wasn't a problem. But now it's costing us. Now it's problematic. And we're finding out that the price we're paying for being bought by Israel is far greater than the price we would pay if we refused to bend the knee to Israel. And I think you're going to see a diminishment of AIPAC's influence in the years to come as there is a collective moral rebellion against Israel, against the pro-Israeli lobby. And once we figure out that we don't need AIPAC to win elections, once that code is broken, that's the end of AIPAC. That's the only relevance they have. Because at the end of the day, we will abandon Israel like we'll abandon everybody else. Israel's not essential to our existential survival as a nation. And therefore, the moment that the continued pro-Israeli policies raise an existential question of our survival, when push comes to shove, we will push Israel to the side, just like we push everybody else to the side. So, AIPAC, enjoy it while you got it, guys, because I don't think it's going to be here forever. And I think it's going to be sooner rather than later.
A lot of prophetic words coming out of Scott Ritter's mouth in this interview tonight, I must say, on a number of issues. An excellent analysis. So my last question for tonight, again, since the elections are nearby, is there any logic? It's more hope on our part, but is there any logic to the thinking that a decisive phone call from the US could immediately put a halt to the Israeli war and genocide machine? My final question for tonight.
Well, the answer is unequivocally yes. The President of the United States can shut this all down overnight because we don't have treaty relationships with Israel. That's one of the great weaknesses of the U.S.-Israeli relationship. We don't have treaty relationships. See, treaty relationships are ratified by Congress and are subjected to congressional oversight and review. What we have is a series of long-standing executive understandings. So the president is uniquely empowered when it comes to Israel to shut it down. He can decide right now to stop sending weapons to Israel. He can pull the American embassy out of Israel. He could turn to the Justice Department and say, I find that AIPAC is a foreign agent. Treat them as a foreign agent. He can shut down the banks He can shut everything down right now. He has that power. He doesn't
No
need to go to
no
Congress.
longer support them, not indefinitely, for a month at the UN. Just saying.
You can do just like they're doing now. They're starting to send those signals. Did the
Yes, you're right.
president did the president go to Congress and ask permission to do this? No. Did the
No.
president go to Congress and ask permission to send the letters to Benjamin Netanyahu saying in 30 days we'll stop arms shipments if you don't do this? No. The president could pick up the phone right now and make Israel do anything he wanted to. He'll pay a heavy political price.
Yeah.
AIPAC will be mobilized, Congress will be mobilized, but a president that has, let's put it this way, in 1991 or 1990, in the lead up to the Gulf War,
Yeah.
Israel was putting a lot of pressure on the United States, but we were putting pressure on Israel regarding settlements. And at
Yeah.
a period of time, I think it was, I'm trying to remember the prime minister during the war. I can see his face, but I can't see him.
You mean the Israeli prime minister?
In 1990, 1991. Yeah.
You think it was Rabin?
No. It was a different man.
The shorter guy.
Shorter guy. Yeah.
Short,
Came after Begin.
yeah, it's at the tip of my tongue too.
Yeah, it's same here, but I can't remember his name. But but I remember he was the Israelis were trying to put pressure on and make phone calls. And finally, Paul Wolfowitz, who was an assistant secretary of defense, he turned to the Israelis and he wrote down a telephone number and handed it to him. And he said, "That's the White House. Call them when you're ready to talk. Until then, don't talk to any of us because we're done with you." And they walked.
Shamir.
Yes, Shamir.
Yeah.
And so we can stand up to the Israelis. We have in the past. It just takes presidential leadership. And Joe Biden could do it today. That's what's so frustrating about this 30-day thing. It's so political because he's delaying the elections. If he truly cared about the Palestinians, he'd tell the Israelis, you have 72 hours. In 72 hours, I want 350 trucks to appear in Gaza right now, which means you will have a ceasefire in Gaza right now. And on the 73rd hour, if you haven't done exactly what I said without any debate, discussion, or dialogue, then we terminate all military assistance. I pull the ambassador out. We pull everything out. Ships go away. You're on your own. That's it. And if you continue to attack UNIFIL, the carriers will reappear and will bomb you. That's what we're going to do, Israel. Do you understand? And do I make myself clear? And he can get away with it if he has the courage. That won't happen.
He could
because
go,
Donald Trump.
Whoever has the guts to do this will go down in history, global history, not their country, not the US history, as the president who saved the world from the brink of nuclear disaster, just like with the Cuban Missile Crisis back then.
It would go down in American history as the president that saved America.
Yeah.
Because by breaking ourselves free of this Israeli influence, because this pro-Israeli lobby is going to be the death of America. If we continue down this path, it will lead to the potential nuclear conflict between the United States and Iran. And once that nuclear genie's out of the bottle, there's no telling what happens. So, but if you're expecting Donald Trump to make that phone call, it isn't going to happen. And if you're expecting Kamala Harris to make that phone call, it isn't going to happen. So yes, there's the potential to make that phone call if we elected the right leader, but neither of the two candidates that are up for this office right now will make that phone call.
So the question has been answered on why would US election results matter to us? They really don't. For now.
But here's the only spin I'll put on that. The only thing that matters is the reality on the ground.
Exactly.
And so more important than waiting for a magic bullet to come from the United States, it's for the resistance to create the conditions for political change. Yeah. Kamala Harris, if she's elected, will have to deal with the reality that she confronts on January 20th. Donald Trump, if he is elected, will have to deal with the reality that he confronts on January 20th. Not the fiction in their minds right now. It doesn't matter. What happens on January 20th. And as we've seen, a lot can happen between now and then.
Exactly. Took it out of my mouth. A lot. We don't know where things will stand by then. We could be who would have known that we would have been talking about Nasrallah's demise, top brass of Hezbollah, all of them dead within a matter of a span of just a few weeks. So yeah,
or 200 Iranian missiles hitting Israel.
exactly. Just
if you remember in the Gulf War, Iraq fired 48 missiles against Israel during the entire conflict. Iran hit Israel with 200 missiles in less than a couple hours.
Yes, exactly. So Scott Ritter, a true American patriot, and I'm saying it with all the meaning of the word, especially some words that you put out tonight, how you had a 180 change of heart, not just mind, of heart about the Arab people, especially the Palestinian people, because you did say that Lebanese were somewhere on another level for you, but you are a true American patriot. That makes you a true American patriot, because Americans, for us, true American people, are people of courage and heart and truth. You are from the old caste, and they don't make them like you anymore, sir. Thank you very much for being the truth teller that you are. Never once to mince your words. Please, please keep it up. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for inaugurating Unfiltered with Sam and sharing your invaluable thoughts and analysis. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, and I certainly hope we can do it again down the road.
Thank you very much, sir.